Right, today in the shop, we're working on the old 48 again. And when I first built this truck, I had the heater core and the heater stuff all ripped out of it. And it all goes, supposed to go right down here. And I have all that stuff. I just haven't gotten around to putting it all back in so I can actually have heat in the truck. So before I do all that, I want to check the heater core to make sure I don't have any leaks. Because I hate to put all that stuff back in there, then have to rip it all out if I got a leaky heater core. So what we're going to do, well, first thing I had to do is these ends were all misshapen, crushed. So I had an air chisel piece, had a nice little bevel on it. Kind of got in here, worked it around, got it all kind of straightened out again. So now what we're going to do is I have a couple pieces of heater hose, and I have put a quick coupler for my air hose on one end, and that will go on one end just like this. And then the other end I have just blocked off so the air can't pass through. So it will go on the other end like so. And then what I will do is I'll get these all tightened up, and I'll put my air hose to here, and we'll dip this heater core into the water, and we'll see if we have any bubbles. Hopefully not. But if so, we can track down where it's leaking at, and hopefully we can solder it up. Now, before you hook, if you're going to try this, do not hook any air up to that without it being through a pressure regulator. I have my pressure regulator set up about 5 psi, maybe 10 at the most, because that cannot withstand high pressures. If you think about it, your cooling system in your vehicle, you're probably running 12, 15 psi, maybe a little more than that, before your pressure cap blows to release the pressure. So you do not want to run any air pressure through this system that's going to blow things up, because then it's going to be a bad day. So if you're going to try something like this, be sure you have a pressure regulator on your compressor or your air tank or whatever you're using, and be sure and have it set down really low. Because, as a matter of fact, you can always kind of bump it up a little bit. It doesn't take much pressure for the air to escape out of the system, and you'll find it. So the lower the better. Just don't put full bore air compressor air to this, because it won't like it. Alright, I'm going to get this stuff tightened up, and then when I bring you back, we'll be testing it to see how we're doing. Alright, and as suspected, we've got a leak. I got a little bubbler there. Looks like it's there's a seam right there. Looks like it might be just from the seam. I don't know if that bubbler's coming across or if there's another leak there. And I do have some bubbles right down there. So I'll have to get this thing out of the water here and see if it's going to be salvageable or not. It may be too soft to repair. We'll just have to check it out and see. I'm kind of hoping I can fix it. I really don't want to buy a new one if I can keep from it, if you can even find one. So let me see if I can get this thing out of here and see what's leaking and how bad. Okay, so finally, after messing with this thing for an hour or two here, I think I finally got all the leaks stopped. Again, I need to get a tripod so I can actually record doing this stuff. But I had a leak right here on this seam. Actually had a leak around this nipple sticking out. And then I had a leak here, actually in the tank. And there was a little leak in the seam right there. And so I've got it I had it pressurized and no more bubbles. So then I added some water in it, pressurized it, no water coming out. So I think we are good to go. So now how this works, to do this is you take a torch and you heat up the area that you need to try and fix real good and let that solder, see there's old solder in here to begin with, so you let that get good and shiny, and then you take a brush, wire brush, and you brush that all up real good. Get all the contaminants out of there that you can. And then you take your flux paste and a brush, and you've got to use flux paste. It will not hold or work if you don't. So you take your flux paste, smear across there really good, and then you take some more solder and you heat that up, and you'll see the solder in the joint get shiny again, and then you add new solder on top of that. And then the flux helps combine the two different solders, and hopefully you'll have a good tight seal. A couple of them I had to do a couple times. This one up here, this whole pipe comes out, and there's actually a solder joint right in back here. So I had to bend this out of the way a little bit and resolder that back in place. What I did here is I took the whole tube out. I heated this whole area up, pulled that tube out, cleaned everything up real good, put the tube back in. Well, I put flux paste on both the tube and the housing, the tank, and then put the tube back in, and then get this all nice and heated up, and get your solder stuck on there until it melts down inside. And everything seems to be working good. So I'm going to attempt, in the start of this video, I said that you do not want to pressurize this over 5-7 psi, because it could possibly blow. These tanks are really thin. Like I said, there's just some holes out in the middle here that I had to solder over. Like I said, the tanks are really, really thin, and if you do not lower your air pressure, you will have a bad day. I'm going to set this up here, or attempt to, and see, there we go, if I can show you what I'm wanting to show you. So bear with me here just a minute. There we go. Now, watch this side right here. Hopefully it'll show up. I'm going to add a little bit of air pressure to it. You see that move? That's that tank expanding out. So if you do not lower your air pressure when you go to try this, you will blow something up. So, like I said, it's doable enough. Luckily, all my leaks were here on the seam on the outside. You can have one of these tubes end up getting a hole inside there, so what you'd have to do is you would have to break these fins out of the way to get down in and either kink off and solder one of the tubes, or maybe you can get lucky enough and just be able to solder a pinhole in the tube. But I got lucky enough that all mine were right here on the seam and over here on the tube. So I did price a new one of these, and you can get them, but they're about anywhere from $250 to $300. And I just really didn't want to sink that kind of money into this old girl yet. Like I said, I'm wanting to move this all over onto a newer drivetrain eventually, and so I don't want to put a ton of money into this setup just yet, because once I move it over onto a newer chassis, I will probably think about putting AC in it, and it's about $1,600 for the whole setup where you've got your vents under the dash and everything. I don't know, we'll have to think about that down the road. But anyway, so I'm going to say that my heater core is good enough, and I'll work on getting it put in the truck, and I'll try and video a little bit of that when I get to that point. But for now, thanks.